It's warm in here. That's awesome. I'm going to try to teach this morning on the Family Worship Center vision statement. It has been on your calendar the last couple months. This month I put it right up here. Love God, learn His purpose, live His plan. The vision statement is basically, why are we here? Why are we here as a church? What's our purpose? And I want to give you a little bit of background about the creation. The Family Worship Center's leadership team met in April of 2022, and this is one of the things we developed during this time, and a lot of time and thought was put into this. We looked at every word to see if it's really what we wanted to express. For example, originally it was love God, learn His word, and live the life. Well, learn the word, learn His word is good, but learning His word is really about learning what His purpose is for you. So we changed that. And you can be book smart, but not really apply it to your life. So we want you to apply the word, not just learn it. And then it said live the life. Well, the life could be, I'm dedicated to sailing around the world. I'm going to live that life. That's not the life we want you to live. We want you to live His life, His plan that He has for you. So we all agreed this simple vision statement is fairly easy to remember, but it packs a lot of meaning. Love God, learn His purpose, live His plan. The 3 L's. Love, learn, and live. So the first step I want to talk about, and that's probably the main one I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to talk about all 3, but my main focus will be on loving God, and I'm going to start with it, and then I'm going to end with it. Love God is the first step, and we need to love God. This can come in different degrees. As you get to know Him better, you love Him more. When couples first start dating or talking, they start asking all kinds of questions to get to know each other better. What's your favorite color? What's your favorite thing to do? They spend time together. In order to learn about each other. When Mark and I were first married, I was a stay-at-home mom at that time. I cooked all the meals. At one time, I did cook. But I wanted to cook meals that he really liked. But he was always so polite. He said all the meals were good. And I thought, no, this really can't be true. He doesn't like them all equally. So I was really intent on pleasing him. So I started asking him, well, how often would you like me to prepare this? And sometimes, once a week would be great. I'm going, okay, that's a keeper. I can do that and again. But sometimes he'd tell me, about once a year. I knew that recipe I could toss. But that was my way. I wanted to really get to know him. I wanted to please him. So I was trying to learn more about this man that I loved. And I wanted to please him. This is how we should be with our Jesus. We should want to learn more about Him. We should want to spend more time with Him. Yes. I'm going to circle back to loving God. The second step is learn His purpose. And this sounds pretty simple. Our general purpose in life can be found by reading His Word. We read good books about Him. We listen to God-anointed preaching, teaching. Specific purposes for our life, we need to talk to Him and seek godly counsel. And if we really love God, this step should be easy. We're going to want to learn His purpose if we truly love God. The third step is live His plan. So we need to set goals, how we would accomplish this. How will we live the plan? His plan. If our goal, for example, is to pray more, then we need to set specific goals to help us accomplish this. When will I pray? Where will I pray? How will I pray? If our goal is to read the Bible, how will I accomplish this? Will we read the Bible through in a year? Will we study a specific topic? What will we study? Where will we study? So you need to set goals. You don't just say, I'm going to do this. You've got to break it down, and how am I going to accomplish that? I'm going to put a little plug in for my Bible study we're having at my home. We just finished studying the book of Matthew, and we studied about 3 chapters a week. And I told Cassandra the other day, this really made me study, because I wanted to be prepared. I read those 3 chapters in several different translations. I read it, several different commentaries on it. I really studied it. So it made me study. That was my goal. That was my plan. But I loved it. This has become my favorite way to study the scriptures, because as we discussed it, somebody would ask a question. I thought, I never even thought of that. Or they'd bring up a point, oh, I never even thought of that. So just getting together and discussing it was very good. So that was the way. Lately, I've been living his plan by studying his word. Okay, so this mission statement, all of our church programs and activities need to reflect this vision statement, right? If this is our vision. As part of this church, your life should reflect this vision statement. Love God, learn his purpose, live his plan. Okay, this is what I felt like God wanted me to teach, but I thought, oh, this isn't enough. How am I going to really develop this? I'm not sure where to go next. This is 5 minutes. So as I was praying, let me share with you how God led me to the rest of it. It was a kind of a God thing. So I'm going to circle back. The leadership team has also been reading a book a month and giving a report at our meetings. Last week, Sister Tammy Phillips taught on the book she had read and studied, Guarding the Channels of the Supernatural by Kim Haney. That's what she taught about. Well, at our last meeting, when everybody was given the report, I thought, okay, let me check some of these books out. And I have a Rushville library app on my iPad, so I was looking to see which ones they had that I could download, that I could read. There are about 4 that they had, but none of them were available right away. So I put them all on hold, and I thought, okay, God, whichever one you know I need to read next, have it come up first. So the one that came up first was actually further down on the hold list. I didn't think it was going to come up first, but it did, and it was like, oh, this isn't really one I wanted to read. Honest. I thought, that didn't really appeal to me. I'm sorry, Brother Philip Farley. He's the one that recommended it. It was Beautiful Outlaw by John Eldridge. It was his recommended book. But I prayed, let the first one that come up be the one I needed. So, okay, I'll read it, Lord, whatever you want. So about a third of the way book, I'm going, this is the answer to the rest of my prayer. This is what I need to develop the rest of this message. So I've told you that for a reason. God is so smart, and look how he orchestrated that. He knew me. He knew what would appeal to me and what wouldn't. He orchestrated that. He is so smart. And he really has kind of a sense of humor, because that's not the one I would have read. I bet he's up there going, ha ha, see, I showed you. I mean, you could just see that sense of humor there. So I told you that story for that reason. Anyway, the rest of this is basically from his book, John Eldridge's book, Beautiful Outlaw. In this book, he helps you discover new insights about Jesus, learning Jesus more. If we learn Jesus more, we're going to love him more. Where he gets his title is that Jesus was accused of breaking the law and keeping bad company. So he was so dangerous they had to kill him. He was the outlaw. But so that title for me, it didn't appeal to me. Maybe it appeals to you. But anyway, John Eldridge shows Jesus in different lights, in all different aspects of his personality. Like I said, when we learn more about Jesus, we're going to love him more. So here's some of the highlights that he goes through about in his book, Jesus' personality. He spends a whole chapter on each of these. I'm just going to give it to you in short little thing. But first thing he brings out, he has a sense of humor. We're made in his image. We all have senses of humor. We find things funny, and so one thing that illustrates this I find is kind of humorous if you look at it that way. Luke 24, verse 13 through 32, a little bit lengthy, but I think it's worth the read. It says, and behold, two of them went that same day to a village called Emmaus, which was from Jerusalem about 60 furlongs. And they talked together of these things which had happened. And it came to pass that while they communed together and reasoned, Jesus himself drew near and went with them. So here Jesus is walking with them. But their eyes were holden that they did not know him. They should not know him. And he said unto them, what manner of communication are these that you have one to another as you walk and are sad? What are you talking about? And one of them said, whose name was Cleopas, and answering said unto him, art thou only a stranger in Jerusalem? He's talking to Jesus. Art you a stranger in Jerusalem? Hast not thou known the things which have come to pass there in these days? And he said unto them, what things? So he's playing dumb here. And they said unto him, concerning Jesus of Nazareth, which was a prophet, mighty in deed and word before God and all the people, and how the chief priests and our rulers delivered him to be condemned to death and have crucified him. But he trusted that it had been he which should have redeemed Israel, and beside all this, today is the third day since these things were done. Yea, and certain women also of our company made us astonished, which were early in the sepulchre. And when they found not his body, they came, saying that they had also seen a vision of angels, which said that he was alive. And certain of them which were with us went to the sepulchre, and found it even so as the woman had said, but him they saw not. Then he said unto them, O fools, and slow of heart to believe all the prophets had spoken. Ought not Jesus to have suffered these things and to enter into his glory? And beginning at Moses and all the prophets, he expounded unto them all the scriptures, the things concerning himself. And they drew into the village whither they went, and he made as though he would have gone farther. He pretended he was going to travel on and not stay with them. Isn't that playful? I think that's playful. And they constrained him and said, abide with us, for it is toward evening, and the day is far spent. And they went in to tarry with him. And it came to pass, as he sat at meat with them, he took bread, and blessed it, and broke, and gave it to them. And their eyes were opened, and they knew him. And he vanished out of their sight. They finally knew who he was, and boom, he's gone. I just think that's so playful, and I think it shows a sense of humor. And they said one to another, did not our heart burn within us while he talked with us by the way, and while he opened to us the scriptures? So Jesus has a sense of humor. Sometimes it's important to remember that. Another point he makes is he's fully human. And you can find several places. And in each chapter, John Eldridge pulls out several different examples. I just pulled one for each character trait. But in Luke 22, verse 44, I don't think anything shows that he's more human than this. As he was in the garden, and being in great agony, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat was as it were great drops of blood falling down to the ground. I mean, he prayed so hard that he sweat blood, and that is a physical condition that can happen to human beings when they're under a lot of stress. So Jesus was fully human. The next point, he was extravagantly generous. He wasn't just generous, he was extravagant about it. John 2, verse 6 through 11, we're all familiar with this story, but think about it as how extravagantly generous he was. And there were set there 6 water pots of stone after the manner of the purifying of the Jews, containing 2 or 3 firkins apiece. Jesus said unto them, fill the water pots with water, and they filled them up to the brim. And he said unto them, draw out now, and bear unto the governor of the feast. And they bore it. When the ruler of the feast had tasted the water that was made wine, and knew not whence it was, but the servants which drew the water knew. And the governor of the feast called the bridegroom, and said unto him, every man at the beginning doth set forth good wine, and when men have well drunk, then that which is worse, but that thou hast kept the good wine until now. This beginning of the miracles did Jesus in Cana of Galilee, and manifested forth his glory, and his disciples believed on him. I had never done the math on this. A firkin is 11 gallons apiece. So he filled 2 or 3 of those. So that, and he had, no, he had, yeah, I'm sorry, let me back up. A firkin is 11 gallons. And the pots they had held 2 or 3 firkins. So, and there were 6 pots. So if you do the math, that's like between 132 and 180 gallons. How extravagant was he? Now, you have to understand in those days, a wedding took place over a week's time. Okay, so this wasn't just all for one day. It was over a week's time. So, but still, how extravagant, how generous he was. And it was the best. So that's one of the examples of how generous Jesus is. He's honest. We all know he's honest. Luke 11:37 through 39. And as he spoke, a certain Pharisee besought him to dine with him, and he went in and sat down to meat. And when the Pharisee saw it, he marveled that he had not first washed after dinner. And the Lord said unto him, Now do you Pharisees make clean the outside of the cup and the platter, but your inward part is full of ravenness and wickedness. I mean, he just told him how it was. He was honest with the Pharisees. So God is honest. Sometimes, even when we don't want to hear it, he is honest. He is scandalous, has scandalous freedom. It went against the norm. Matthew 8, verse 2 and 3. And behold, there was a leper, and worshipped him, saying, Lord, if thou wilt, thou canst make me clean. And Jesus put forth his hand and touched him, and saying, I will, be thou clean. And immediately his leprosy was cleansed. You were not supposed to touch lepers. But he was free. He didn't pay any attention to that. He touched him and healed him. He's cunning and smart. I already talked about that. But Matthew 22, verse 15 through 22. Then went the Pharisees and took counsel how they might entangle him in his talk. And they sent out unto him their disciples with the Herodians, and said, Master, we know that thou art true, and teachest the way of God in truth. Neither carest thou for any man, for thou regardest not the person of men. Tell us therefore, what thinkest thou? Is it lawful to give tribute unto Caesar or not? But Jesus perceived their wickedness, and said, Why tempt ye me, you hypocrites? Show me the tribute money. And they brought unto him penny, and he said unto them, Whose is the image and subscription? And they said it unto him, Caesar's. And then he said unto them, Render therefore unto Caesar's the things which are Caesar's, and unto God the things which are God's. And when they heard these things, they marveled, and left him, and went their way. So how smart he was to think of that. He knew what they were up to, and he kind of confounded them and amazed them in his answer to them. You find that over and over in the scriptures. Jesus was very humble. Philippians 2, 5 through 8. Let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus, who being in the form of God, thought it not robbery to be equal with God, but made himself of no reputation, and took upon himself the form of a servant, and was made in the likeness of man, and being found in fashion as a man, he humbled himself and became obedient unto death, even the death of the cross. So he made himself humble. He came, you see that over and over in scriptures too. The way he was born, the way he died, his whole life was very humble. God is true. Jesus is true. John 7 and 18, he speaketh of himself, seeketh his own glory, but he that seeketh his glory that sent him, the same is true. There is no unrighteousness in him, none. He's beautiful. Matthew 26, 6 through 8, Mary knew this more than any. I think now when Jesus was at Bethany in the house of Simon the leper, there came unto him a woman having an alabaster box of very precious ointment, and poured it on his head. And he sat at meat. And when his disciples saw it, they had indignation, saying, To what purpose is this waste? For this ointment might have been sold for much and given to the poor. But when Jesus understood it, he said unto them, Why trouble ye the woman? For she had wrought a good work unto me. And for you have the poor always with you, but me you have not always. For in that she had poured this ointment on my body and did it for my burial. Verily I say unto you, wheresoever this gospel shall be preached in the whole world, there shall also this, that this woman hath done, be told for a memorial for her. She saw how beautiful Jesus was and worshiped him in this way. And this one, God is loving, Jesus is loving. That's probably what the first characteristics that we learn about him. John 21:7, therefore the disciple whom Jesus loved, and God's no respecter of persons, Jesus loved the disciple, said unto Peter, it is the Lord. Now when Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he girt his fisher's coat unto him, for he was naked, and did cast himself into the sea. So God is no respecter of persons. He loves us all. And that's probably the first characteristic as we learn about Jesus. So John Eldredge, in his book, he goes through all these character traits. And as you learn more, if you really study this and learn more about Jesus, you should love him more. There's more good things to love him for. As I go through life, I reflect on all the good he's done in my life, and I love him more. Ideally, in a marriage, the same thing happens. A good friend of mine told me once that her husband didn't want her to look like she did when he first married her, because he loved her more now, and the way she was now that represented who she was now, and he loved her more. That's in a good marriage. That's how it should be. But that's how it should be with Jesus. As we learn more about him and we grow in our relationship with him, we should learn how to love him more. I've said all this, but we put limits on Jesus because we don't know him well enough, or our life experiences influence how we see Jesus. Let me say that again, because this is my main point. We put limits on Jesus because we don't know him well enough, or our life experiences influence how we see him. So it influences how we love him. John Eldredge, in his book, prays this prayer. I renounce every limit that I've ever placed on Jesus. I renounce every limit that I've placed on him in my life. I break all limitations, renounce them, revoke them. Jesus, forgive me for restraining you in my life. I give you full permission to be yourself with me. I ask you, for the real you. Can we pray this and really mean it, to be able to fall in love with Jesus even more? Let me ask you a couple questions. What do you think of Jesus? Even harder, what do you think Jesus thinks of you? We interpret Jesus through our brokenness. Our life experiences influence how we see him and how we think he sees us. We can overcome this. To be able to love him more, we need to overcome this. First, you need to name your problem. Where is your struggle with Jesus? And if we're honest, we all have them. Let me go through some questions, and I'm going to circle back to those. Do you find it hard to believe he loves you? Does he love you because of what you do? Do you always feel like you're disappointing him? Is he mad at you? Is he ignoring you? Does Jesus seem like a hard man who wants to make you work harder? Does he seem distant? Loving, sure, but disengaged? After you identify your problems, you need to invite Jesus into that mess. It's a mess. There isn't anything you can show him that he hasn't seen before. He's not going to be shocked. He's not going to be angry. He's not going to be disappointed. If you can't get over it, you need to forgive God. Now, does God need forgiving? No. But if it's on your mind and you're blaming him, maybe it will help you to say, God, I forgive you for ignoring me. That sounds kind of crazy, but maybe it'll help you. Next, we ask Jesus to free us from these wounds of our past so we can know him and love him. Your brokenness and your sin are not something you overcome so you can walk with God. These are occasions for you to cry out, for the life of Jesus to rescue you. We've heard this over and over in recent messages. We all have scars. We all have influences in our background that need to be healed. Hebrews 12, 1 through 3. And I'm reading it in the New Living Translation. I don't think they had it back there, so they probably have it in the King James. But therefore, since we are surrounded by such a huge crowd of witnesses to the life of faith, let us strip off every weight that slows us down, especially that sin so easily trips us. And let us run with endurance the race God has set before us. We do this by keeping our eyes on Jesus, the champion who initiates and perfects our faith. Because of the joy awaiting him, he endured the cross, disregarding its shame. Now he is seated in the place of honor beside God's throne. Think of all the hostility he endured from sinful people. Then you won't become weary and give up. Our suffering separates us from Jesus. Our feelings of abandonment, anger, our loss of hope, mistrust, forsakenness. 2 Corinthians 1 and 5. For the sufferings of Christ abound in us, so our consolation also aboundeth in Christ. We suffer. To be able truly to love God, to learn his purpose, live his plan, we need to really love God. That's the first step. If we really love God, it's going to be easy to learn his purpose and live his plan. So that's why I focus more on loving God, because that is the first step, and that is an important one. As we stand this morning, I want you to sincerely ask God. I want you to take a minute. Is there anything holding you back from loving him like we should? I'm going to read these questions again. I want you to really ask yourself. Do you find it hard to believe he loves you? Does he love you because of what you do? Do you always feel like you're disappointing him? Is he mad at you? Is he ignoring you? Does Jesus seem like a hard man who wants you to work harder? Does he seem distant? Loving, sure, but disengaged? Ask yourself, and then invite Jesus into that mess of your life. Yes. Let's do that just right now. Let him do a healing work. Let him do a healing work.